My sister stole my inheritance by manipulating our dying father, so I contested the will and fought her in court. I was 34 when Dad called to tell me he had pancreatic cancer. 6 months, maybe less, the doctor said. My sister Vanessa, who hadn't spoken to him in 3 years after their blowout over her gambling debts, suddenly became the devoted daughter. I'm moving back home to take care of him, she announced during our family meeting at the hospital. He needs someone there full-time. I lived 2 hours away with my husband and twin daughters. My nursing job provided our family's health insurance, so I couldn't just quit. But I visited every weekend, bringing Dad's favorite Chinese takeout and helping with his medications. Everything seemed normal until I noticed changes during my visits. Dad, who used to greet me with bear hugs, became distant. Conversations felt stilted. When I asked about his will, something we'd discussed openly before, he'd change the subject. Vanessa handles all that paperwork now, he'd mumble. Too complicated for my old brain. But his brain was fine. The cancer hadn't spread there. This was the man who'd run a successful construction company for 30 years. The red flags started appearing in October. I arrived for my usual Saturday visit to find the house completely rearranged. Family photos featuring me and my kids were gone, replaced with enlarged pictures of Vanessa from high school. Dad's antique desk, the one he'd promised would be mine someday, was moved to Vanessa's room. Dad needed more space in the living room, Vanessa explained when I asked. His mobility is getting worse. That was a lie. I'd seen him walking fine the week before. During Thanksgiving, I overheard her on the phone in the kitchen. Yes, he signed everything, she said quietly. No, she doesn't know yet. Don't worry. By the time she finds out, it'll be too late to challenge anything. My blood turned to ice. I pretended to use the bathroom and recorded the rest of the conversation through the door. The lawyer said as long as he's deemed mentally competent when he signs, her claims won't hold up. I've been documenting his lucid moments all month. That night, I confronted Dad privately. Did you change your will? I asked directly. His eyes darted away. Vanessa thinks it's better this way. She's here taking care of me. You have your own life. Dad, that house has been in our family for 60 years. You always said you wanted it to stay in the family, for my girls. Things change, he said, but I could see the conflict in his eyes. I knew then that Vanessa had gotten to him, twisted his perception during those long days when I wasn't there to counter her influence. Dad passed away on January 15th. The reading of the will happened 3 days later. Everything, the house, his savings, his life insurance, even his tools, went to Vanessa. I got nothing, not even a family photo. Dad wanted to provide for the daughter who sacrificed everything to care for him, the lawyer explained, reading Dad's supposed words. Vanessa sat there with fake tears, playing the grieving daughter perfectly. That's when I pulled out my phone and played the recording. Yes, he's signed everything. No, she doesn't know yet. The lawyer's face went white. Vanessa's tears stopped instantly. Where did you get that? She hissed. Your Thanksgiving confession, I replied calmly, along with photos of you removing my pictures from Dad's house and documentation of every lie you told him about me. I'd spent 2 months gathering evidence. Bank records showing her debts, texts where she admitted to manipulating Dad's medication schedule to make him more confused when I visited. Even security footage from Dad's neighbor showing her screening his calls from me. I'm contesting this will, I announced, and I'm filing for elder abuse. The court case was set for April, but what I discovered during the legal proceedings changed everything I thought I knew about my sister and my father's final months. The first bombshell came during discovery. My attorney, Carmen Rodriguez, had subpoenaed Dad's medical records. What we found made my stomach turn. Your father was prescribed OxyContin for pain management, Carmen explained, spreading the documents across her desk. But look at these pharmacy records. The prescriptions were being filled weekly, sometimes twice a week, far more than Dad's pain level required. Your sister was either selling the excess or using it to keep your father sedated, Carmen continued. I've seen this before in elder abuse cases. I thought about those final months, how Dad seemed drowsy during my visits, how Vanessa always had an excuse for why he was having a bad day whenever I called. There's more, Carmen said, pulling up bank statements on her laptop. Your sister had access to your father's checking account. Look at these withdrawals. $500 here, $200 there. Always amounts small enough to avoid triggering bank alerts, but over 6 months they totaled nearly $30,000. She was funding her gambling addiction with Dad's money, I whispered. And when that wasn't enough, she decided to take everything, Carmen finished. The second discovery was even worse. Dad's neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, an 82-year-old retired teacher, had been keeping a diary. I knew something wasn't right, she told us during her deposition. I could hear them arguing almost daily. She handed Carmen a composition notebook filled with her careful handwriting. October 8th, heard Vanessa screaming at him about being ungrateful. October 15th, saw her throw his dinner plate against the wall through the kitchen window. October 23rd, called to check on him, but Vanessa said he was too sick for visitors. But the entry that broke my heart was dated November 30th. Harold was in his garden this morning crying. When I asked what was wrong, he said his daughter told him that his other daughter, the nurse, said he was a burden and wished he would just die already. I told him that didn't sound like something a nurse would say, especially not about her own father. He looked so confused. I had never said anything remotely like that. The manipulation ran deeper than I'd imagined. During our investigation, we uncovered Vanessa's complete financial picture. She owed $45,000 to 3 different casinos. Her credit cards were maxed out. She'd been evicted from 2 apartments in the past year. She was desperate, Carmen explained. Your father's estate was worth approximately $400,000. That house alone is valued at $280,000. But the most damaging evidence came from an unexpected source, Vanessa herself. Carmen had subpoenaed her phone records and social media accounts. What we found was a digital paper trail of her real feelings about Dad. Text to her friend Monica, dated September 12th. Finally figured out how to get the old man's money, just have to play nursemaid for a few months. Text to her ex-boyfriend Derek, October 3rd. He's so weak now, believes everything I tell him. This is easier than I thought. Facebook message to her gambling buddy Trevor, November 18th. Almost got everything signed over. Should be able to pay you back by Christmas. But the worst was a voice message she'd sent to Monica just 3 days before Dad died. I can't wait for this to be over. Pretending to care about him is exhausting. At least when he's gone, I'll never have to see my self-righteous sister again. As we prepared for trial, I learned more about the lawyer who drafted the new will. Thomas Brennan had been disciplined twice by the state bar for failing to ensure clients understood the full implications of their legal documents. He's basically a predator who targets vulnerable elderly clients, Carmen explained. Vanessa probably found him specifically because of his reputation. During his deposition, Brennan claimed he'd met with Dad 3 times to discuss the will changes, but Dad's medical records showed he was in the hospital for emergency treatment on 2 of those supposed meeting dates. So you're saying you conducted legal consultations with a man who was unconscious in intensive care? Carmen asked. Brennan's face flushed red. I may have confused the dates. The deeper we dug, the more we uncovered about Brennan's operation. He worked out of a strip mall office between a nail salon and a check cashing place. His secretary, Dolores Finch, had been with him for 15 years and knew exactly what kind of business they were running. He'd have me schedule these home visits with elderly clients, she testified during her deposition. Always when their families weren't around, he'd tell me to make sure I documented that they seemed alert and oriented, no matter what their actual condition was. Dolores had kept copies of everything, partly as insurance, partly because she'd grown uncomfortable with what she was witnessing. Your sister called our office 17 times in September, she told Carmen. She was very specific about timing. She wanted to make sure the appointment happened on a day when her father was having what she called a good cognitive day. But the most damning evidence came from Brennan's own notes, which Dolores had photographed with her phone. Client appears confused about family dynamics, he'd written about Dad. Daughter V has provided extensive documentation of abandonment by other daughter. Client expresses hurt and disappointment about lack of support during illness. Those were Vanessa's lies, fed to Dad systematically, and then regurgitated to Brennan as fact. I started keeping those photos after the Henderson case, Dolores explained. That was an 87-year-old man with dementia. His son had power of attorney, but Mr. Brennan helped the daughter-in-law change the will anyway. The son lost his father's house, the house he'd grown up in. Carmen and I exchanged glances. This wasn't just about our family. This was a pattern. How many elderly clients would you estimate Mr. Brennan has helped manipulate in the past 5 years? Carmen asked. Dolores was quiet for a long moment. At least 20, maybe more. My heart sank thinking about all those families torn apart. All those elderly people taken advantage of in their final years. As we prepared for trial, more disturbing details emerged about Vanessa's behavior during Dad's illness. I reached out to Dr. Elizabeth Hawkins, Dad's oncologist, to get a clearer picture of his mental state during those final months. Your father was actually doing quite well cognitively, Dr. Hawkins told me during our meeting. Pancreatic cancer is brutal physically, but his mind remained sharp. That's why I was surprised when your sister started asking about competency evaluations. She what? In November, she called several times asking if we could document any cognitive decline. She seemed disappointed when I told her there wasn't any significant change in his mental acuity. Dr. Hawkins pulled out Dad's file. She also requested copies of all his medical records multiple times, said she needed them for his will preparations. Did Dad know she was doing this? I don't think so. She always called when he wasn't with her, and she specifically asked me not to mention it to him, said she didn't want to worry him. This painted an even clearer picture of Vanessa's calculated manipulation. She'd been building a case for months, trying to find any evidence that Dad wasn't mentally competent, while simultaneously working to undermine his trust in me. There's something else, Dr. Hawkins continued. Your sister asked me about your father's life expectancy several times, not in a way that seemed caring, more like she was trying to establish a timeline. The coldness of that hit me like a physical blow. Vanessa hadn't just been stealing from Dad. She'd been counting down the days until he died. Through Carmen's investigation, we discovered that Vanessa had contacted 3 different lawyers before finding Brennan. The first 2 had refused to help her after meeting with Dad. Attorney Margaret Walsh was willing to speak with us. I met with your father and sister in early August, she explained. Your father was very clear about his wishes. He wanted his estate split equally between his daughters. When your sister tried to convince him to change that, he became upset. What exactly did she say? She claimed you told her you didn't want the house, that it would be a burden. She said you'd prefer cash instead. Your father looked confused and said that wasn't what you'd told him. Walsh had made detailed notes of the meeting. Your sister became quite agitated when your father wouldn't agree to the changes. She accused him of not appreciating her sacrifice. The meeting ended with your father asking her to leave. Did she try to come back? Several times. She called my office repeatedly, claiming your father had changed his mind. When I insisted on meeting with him alone to confirm any changes, she found reasons why that wouldn't work. That's when Vanessa had found Brennan, a lawyer willing to take her word over Dad's clear wishes. The pattern became even clearer when we spoke to Dr. Francis Murphy, Dad's primary care physician for over 2 decades. Harold was one of my sharpest patients, Dr. Murphy told us. Even with the cancer, his mind was clear right up until the end. He'd ask detailed questions about his medications, remember conversations from previous visits, discuss current events. Dr. Murphy had also been contacted by Vanessa. She brought him in for what she called cognitive assessments 3 different times. Each time, your father tested normally. He was irritated by the tests, couldn't understand why she thought they were necessary. Did she give you a reason for requesting them? She claimed she was worried about his judgment, said he'd been making strange financial decisions and seemed confused about family matters. But during my examinations, he was always coherent and oriented. After one of these appointments, Dad had confided in Dr. Murphy. He told me his daughter was acting strangely, Dr. Murphy recalled. He said she'd been asking him to sign papers he didn't understand and was keeping his other daughter away from him. He seemed distressed about it. Why didn't you report this, Doctor? Murphy looked uncomfortable. I should have. But elder abuse is notoriously difficult to prove, and she always had explanations for her behavior. I did document his concerns in his chart, though. Those chart notes became crucial evidence in our case. As word spread about our lawsuit, other victims of Brennan's practice began reaching out to Carmen. She was building a class action case against him, and our evidence was helping expose his entire operation. Margaret Chen, a 67-year-old widow, had lost her late husband's antique collection when Brennan helped her stepson change the will. My husband specifically left those pieces to our daughter, she explained. They'd been in his family for generations, but his son convinced him that our daughter didn't appreciate them. Robert Fleming, a 78-year-old veteran, had been manipulated into leaving everything to a caregiver he'd known for only 3 months. She isolated me from my kids, he said. Told me they were only interested in my money. By the time I realized what was happening, she'd gotten me to sign papers giving her everything. The stories were heartbreakingly similar. Vulnerable elderly people, isolated by manipulative relatives or caregivers, convinced to change their wills against their original wishes. Carmen was building a case that could potentially shut down Brennan's practice permanently and help other families recover what they'd lost. But first, we had to win our own case. The trial began on a rainy April morning. I sat in the gallery watching Vanessa's attorney paint her as a devoted daughter who'd sacrificed everything to care for our dying father. Ms. Vanessa Thompson left her job, her apartment, her entire life to move back home, her lawyer argued. She provided round-the-clock care while her sister visited occasionally on weekends. When it was Carmen's turn, she methodically destroyed that narrative. First, she played the Thanksgiving recording. The courtroom was silent as Vanessa's voice filled the space. Yes, he signed everything. No, she doesn't know yet. Then came the bank records, the pharmacy records, Mrs. Patterson's diary. But the moment that changed everything was when Carmen called Vanessa to the stand. You testified that you left your job to care for your father, Carmen began. What was that job? I was between positions at the time, Vanessa stammered. Between positions? Or had you been fired from Belmont Casino for stealing from customers' drinks while they gambled? Vanessa's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. You also testified that you left your apartment to move in with your father. But didn't you actually get evicted for non-payment of rent? That's not relevant. And you sacrificed your entire life, as you put it. But these phone records show you left your father alone for hours at a time to go gambling, don't they? Carmen showed the court location data from Vanessa's phone, proving she'd spent entire afternoons at casinos while Dad was supposedly too sick to be left alone. The testimony revealed the true extent of Vanessa's deception. Security footage from 3 different casinos showed her gambling away thousands of Dad's dollars while he sat at home, sick and alone. On November 8th, you were at Riverside Casino from 2 p.m. to 11 p.m., Carmen continued. Your phone records show your father called you 14 times that day. Did you answer any of those calls? I was having a mental health day, Vanessa said weakly. A mental health day? Or were you playing blackjack while your dying father tried desperately to reach you? The casino footage was devastating. There was Vanessa, laughing and drinking while feeding $100 bills into slot machines, completely oblivious to Dad's increasingly frantic voicemails. Please call me back. Dad's voice filled the courtroom as Carmen played the messages. I'm not feeling well. I'm scared. I can't find my medication, came another message. Vanessa, where are you? By the 6th message, Dad's voice was weak and confused. I don't understand where everyone went. I think I need help. The jury was visibly moved. Several members wiped away tears. Carmen then called Dr. Hawkins to testify about Dad's cognitive state. Mr. Thompson was mentally sharp until the day he died, she stated clearly. There was no medical reason for him to have changed his will based on confusion or incompetence. When Vanessa's attorney tried to suggest that cancer pain medication might have affected Dad's judgment, Dr. Hawkins shut that down immediately. Mr. Thompson was on a very conservative pain management regimen. He was adamant about staying alert and clear-headed. The dosages he was prescribed would not have impaired his decision-making abilities. The medical evidence was overwhelming. Dad had been manipulated, not confused. Carmen's next witness was Dolores Finch, Brennan's former secretary. Her testimony exposed the entire fraudulent operation. Mr. Brennan instructed me to document that all elderly clients appeared competent and oriented, regardless of their actual condition, she testified. He said it was insurance against family challenges to the wills. She produced the photographs she'd taken of Brennan's files, evidence that he'd been running this scam for years. In Mr. Thompson's case, Mr. Brennan wrote notes before even meeting him, Dolores continued, based entirely on what Ms. Vanessa Thompson had told him during her initial consultation. The judge looked stunned. You're saying the attorney had already decided the outcome before assessing the client's mental capacity? Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Thompson paid a $5,000 retainer specifically for what she called a guaranteed result. That revelation sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Vanessa had essentially bought a fraudulent will. When Carmen called me to testify, I spoke directly from the heart about my relationship with Dad. He raised me to believe in honesty and integrity, I said, looking directly at the jury. He taught me that family takes care of each other, not takes advantage of each other. I described our weekend visits, how Dad would light up when I brought the girls to see him, how he'd spend hours showing them his woodworking projects and telling them stories about their heritage. The last conversation I had with him was about my daughter's school play, I continued. He was so proud that they'd inherited his artistic talents. He wanted to be there but wasn't strong enough to travel. Carmen showed the jury the photo from Dad's wallet, the one of me and the girls with his handwriting on the back. He carried this everywhere, I said, my voice breaking. Even when Vanessa was convincing him that I didn't care about him, he still carried our picture. The cross-examination was brutal. Vanessa's attorney tried to paint me as an absent daughter who'd abandoned her father in his time of need. "You live 2 hours away and only visited on weekends," he accused. "I have twin daughters and a full-time job that provides health insurance for my family," I replied. "I did everything I could to balance my responsibilities. But you didn't offer to move in and provide full-time care like your sister did." "Because I was never asked," I said firmly. The first I heard about Vanessa's plan to move in was at the hospital. And now I know why. She was already planning to isolate him from me. The attorney tried to suggest that I'd been pressuring Dad to leave me everything, but Carmen's objections shut down that line of questioning. The final blow came when Carmen played the voice message to Monica. "I can't wait for this to be over. Pretending to care about him is exhausting." Vanessa broke down on the stand, but not from grief, from rage. "You don't understand," she screamed at me across the courtroom. "He loved you more. You got the college fund, the car for graduation, everything. I deserved something." The judge banged his gavel, but Vanessa kept going. "You think you're so perfect with your nursing degree and your perfect family. You had everything handed to you while I got nothing." That's when the truth finally came out. Vanessa hadn't been motivated just by greed. She'd been carrying resentment for decades. But Carmen wasn't finished. She had one more witness that would expose the full extent of Vanessa's cruelty. Angela Martinez was a home health aide who'd worked with Dad during his final weeks. "I was hired to help with basic care," she testified. "But Ms. Vanessa Thompson instructed me to limit Mr. Thompson's phone access." "Can you elaborate on that?" "She told me that phone calls upset him and that I should tell callers he was sleeping or too sick to talk." She specifically mentioned his other daughter. Angela described how Dad would ask about me constantly. He'd say, "When is my daughter coming to visit?" I'd tell him about the weekend visits, but he seemed confused. Ms. Thompson had convinced him that you'd stopped caring about him. The most heartbreaking part of Angela's testimony was about Dad's final days. "He was very weak, but he kept asking me to call his daughter. You," she said, looking at me. "He wanted to apologize for something, but he wouldn't tell me what." Ms. Thompson always interrupted these conversations. "Did he seem confused or disoriented during these requests?" "No, ma'am. He was very clear about what he wanted. He just seemed sad, like he'd done something wrong but couldn't remember what." That testimony broke my heart. Dad had died thinking I was angry with him, never knowing that Vanessa had been blocking our communication. Angela also testified about Vanessa's behavior during Dad's final week. She was on her phone constantly, mostly talking about money. She kept saying things like, "Just a few more days?" and "Then I'll be set." Did she seem grief-stricken about her father's condition? Angela shook her head. She seemed impatient, like she was waiting for something to happen. The prosecution's case was devastating. Vanessa's attorney had no credible defense against the mountain of evidence Carmen had presented. During closing arguments, Carmen summarized everything with devastating precision. "This case isn't about sibling rivalry or family disputes," she told the jury. "This is about a calculated scheme to defraud a dying man of his legacy." Vanessa Thompson didn't care for her father. She isolated him, drugged him, stole from him, and convinced him that his loving daughter had abandoned him. She held up the photo from Dad's wallet again. Harold Thompson died thinking his daughter didn't love him. That's the real crime here. Not just the theft of money or property, but the theft of a father's final moments of peace. Vanessa's attorney made a desperate attempt to portray her as a victim of circumstances, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. "We find in favor of the plaintiff," the foreman announced. "The will dated November 15th is declared invalid due to undue influence and fraud." Dad's original will was reinstated, splitting everything equally between Vanessa and me, but I wasn't finished. I pressed charges for elder abuse, theft, and fraud. The district attorney had been following the case and was eager to prosecute. The criminal trial revealed even more disturbing details about Vanessa's behavior. Prosecutors found evidence that she'd been researching Dad's life expectancy and had taken out an additional life insurance policy on him just months before his death. She was essentially betting on when her father would die. Prosecutor James Mitchell told the jury, "This wasn't about caring for him. This was about cashing in on his death." The insurance investigation revealed that Vanessa had lied on the application, claiming Dad had no other beneficiaries and that she was his only caregiver. During the criminal trial, more victims came forward. Vanessa had been running similar scams on other elderly people in her apartment complex. She'd convinced her neighbor, an 89-year-old widow, to loan her $8,000 for medical bills that didn't exist. Mrs. Dorothy Kellerman testified about how Vanessa had manipulated her. "She seemed so sweet at first," Mrs. Kellerman said. "She'd bring me groceries and help with my medications. Then she started telling me that my son was stealing from me." Vanessa had convinced Mrs. Kellerman that her son, who managed her finances, was embezzling from her accounts. "She showed me what she said were bank statements proving he was taking money," Mrs. Kellerman continued. "I was so confused and scared that I gave her access to my accounts to protect me. Those bank statements had been forgeries." Vanessa had stolen Mrs. Kellerman's identity and created fake documents to support her lies. "She told me not to tell my son what we were doing," Mrs. Kellerman said. "She said he'd get angry and put me in a nursing home." Mrs. Kellerman's son, David, testified about discovering the theft. "My mother stopped returning my calls," he said. When I went to check on her, this woman answered the door and said my mother didn't want to see me. She claimed I'd been stealing from her. It had taken David weeks to convince his mother that Vanessa was the actual thief. By then, she'd taken everything my mother had saved for her final years, David said. My mother died thinking I was a criminal because of what this woman told her. The pattern was always the same. Vanessa would target vulnerable elderly people, gain their trust, then systematically isolate them from their families while stealing their money. Thomas Brennan was also charged as a co-conspirator. His law license was permanently revoked, and he faced multiple felony counts. During his testimony, he tried to claim ignorance about Vanessa's manipulation. I relied on my client's representation of the facts, he said unconvincingly. But Prosecutor Mitchell had evidence that Brennan had known exactly what he was doing. You received a $10,000 bonus payment from Ms. Thompson after the will was signed, Mitchell pointed out. That was in addition to your standard fee. What was that payment for? Brennan squirmed in his chair. It was a gift. She was grateful for my services. A gift? Or payment for helping her defraud her dying father? Email evidence showed that Brennan had coached Vanessa on what to say during Dad's competency evaluation. He'd even provided her with a list of symptoms to watch for that might indicate cognitive decline. You were actively helping her build a case for mental incompetence, Mitchell continued, despite having no medical training and never conducting a proper evaluation yourself. The evidence was overwhelming. Vanessa was sentenced to 4 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution to all her victims. Brennan received 6 years and had to surrender his law license permanently. On the day of sentencing, Vanessa looked at me one last time. I hope you're happy, she said. I'm not, I replied honestly. I lost my father and my sister in the same year. But as devastating as it was to lose Vanessa, I realized that the sister I'd grieved for had been gone long before Dad's death. The woman who could manipulate a dying man and steal from elderly neighbors wasn't the sister I'd grown up with. After the trial, I had a decision to make about Dad's house. My husband wanted to sell it and use the money for our daughter's college funds. But standing in Dad's workshop, surrounded by his tools and half-finished projects, I couldn't bear the thought of strangers living there. We moved in that summer. My daughters love having their own rooms and a big backyard. I've turned Dad's workshop into my art studio, something I'd always wanted but never had space for. Mrs. Patterson brings us cookies every Sunday and tells stories about Dad's younger days. She's become like a grandmother to my girls. The neighborhood has embraced us completely. When word spread about what had happened to Dad, several neighbors came forward with their own stories about Vanessa's manipulative behavior. Frank Morrison, who lived 3 houses down, told me how Vanessa had tried to convince him that his daughter was planning to put him in a nursing home. She offered to help me hide my assets, he said. Said she knew a lawyer who could protect my money from my family. Thank God I didn't listen to her. Linda Hayes, whose husband had dementia, described how Vanessa had volunteered to help with his care. She seemed so knowledgeable about medications, Linda said. I didn't realize until later that she'd been taking some of his pills. I thought I was miscounting. The more I learned about Vanessa's activities in the neighborhood, the more I realized that Dad hadn't been her only victim, just her biggest score. I've kept Dad's garden exactly as he left it. Every spring, his tomatoes come back stronger than before. My daughters have learned to tend it, and we donate the excess vegetables to the local food bank, something Dad would have loved. The house has become a gathering place for the neighborhood. We host block parties and holiday celebrations. Dad's dream of a home filled with family and friends has finally come true, just with a different family than he'd imagined. 3 years later, I got a letter from Vanessa in prison. She'd enrolled in an addiction recovery program and wanted to apologize. The letter was 3 pages long, detailing every manipulation, every lie, every cruel thing she'd done. I know I can't undo what I did, she wrote, but I want you to know that Dad talked about you constantly. Even when I was poisoning him against you, he'd still light up when your name came up. He was so proud of the nurse you became, the mother you are. She included a photo she'd found in Dad's wallet after he died. It was of me and my daughters at last year's school play. On the back, Dad had written, "My brilliant daughter and my beautiful granddaughters. I am so blessed." I cried for an hour after reading that. The letter continued with details I'd never known about Dad's final weeks. He kept asking about your daughters, Vanessa wrote. He wanted to buy them Christmas presents but was too weak to go shopping. I told him you said they didn't need anything from him. The look on his face when I said that, I'll never forget how much I hurt him. She described how Dad would sit in his chair, looking at old photo albums of our family. He'd point to pictures of you graduating nursing school and tell me how proud he was. He said you were the strongest person he knew because you'd chosen a career helping people. Reading those words was both healing and heartbreaking. Dad had never stopped believing in me, even when Vanessa was systematically destroying our relationship. The letter ended with something unexpected. I found something hidden in Dad's desk after he died, Vanessa wrote. I should have given it to you at the funeral, but I was so angry and hurt. I'm sending it now. Enclosed was a sealed envelope with my name on it in Dad's handwriting. Inside was a letter dated just 2 weeks before he died. My dearest daughter, it began. If you're reading this, then I'm gone and you've discovered what Vanessa did. I want you to know that despite everything, I never stopped believing in you or loving you. Vanessa is sick, and I was too weak to fight her toward the end. But in my heart, I knew the truth. You are the daughter any father would be proud of. Take care of our house. Make it a home for your family like it was for ours. And please, if possible, forgive your sister someday. She's lost, but maybe not forever. The letter continued with specific instructions about things he wanted me to have. His grandfather's watch, his mother's china, photo albums from my childhood. I hid these things where Vanessa wouldn't find them, he wrote, behind the loose board in the basement workshop. I was afraid she might sell them or throw them away out of spite. Following his directions, I found a small treasure trove of family heirlooms that Vanessa had never discovered. Each item came with a note explaining its history and why Dad wanted me to have it. But the most precious item was a small jewelry box that had belonged to Mom. "This was your mother's most treasured possession," Dad had written. "Inside, you'll find the engagement ring I gave her and the necklace her grandmother left her. I always planned to give these to you when you got married, but I ran out of time. Please wear them and think of how much we both loved you." I keep that letter in my nightstand. Some nights when I miss him most, I read it and remember that love doesn't die, even when everything else falls apart. Vanessa was released early for good behavior. She moved to another state and started working at a rehabilitation center for gambling addicts. She sends a card on Dad's birthday every year, but we haven't spoken directly. In her third card, she included a newspaper clipping about her work at the treatment center. "I know I can never make up for what I did," she wrote on the card, "but I'm trying to help other people avoid the mistakes I made. Maybe that's something." I've thought about reaching out to her, but I'm not ready yet. The healing process has been slow and complicated. My daughters are 12 now. They never met their grandfather, but they know his stories. They know he built this house with his own hands. They know he would have adored them. Last month, I found something while cleaning out Dad's desk. Hidden in a secret compartment was another letter, this one addressed to both his daughters. "To my girls," it read. "I'm writing this because I know families can be complicated and people make mistakes. Vanessa, you're struggling right now, and I wish I knew how to help you find your way back to the person I know you can be. And to my other daughter, you're strong enough to handle whatever comes next. But don't let anger consume you the way it consumed your sister. I built this house with the dream that it would shelter generations of our family. I hope someday you'll both find your way back to each other. Love isn't always enough to fix what's broken, but it's always worth trying." I've kept that letter private, but someday I might share it with Vanessa. When I'm ready. When she's ready. The legal battle accomplished more than just recovering Dad's estate. Carmen's class action lawsuit against Brennan's operation helped a dozen other families recover stolen inheritances. New legislation was passed requiring additional safeguards for elderly people changing their wills, and Brennan's conviction became a landmark case in elder abuse prosecution. Mrs. Patterson, now 85, has become my daughter's honorary grandmother. She babysits when I work late shifts at the hospital and teaches them the same card games she taught Dad when he was a boy. "Your father would be so proud," she tells me often, "not just of what you accomplished in court, but of the life you're building here." She's right. Dad's house has become everything he dreamed it would be, a place where children grow up feeling safe and loved, where neighbors become family, where the past is honored while building toward the future. My daughters have Dad's artistic talents. They spend hours in his workshop, now converted to an art studio, creating paintings and sculptures. When they work, I can almost feel his presence guiding their hands. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd tried harder to reach out to Vanessa during Dad's illness, if I'd pushed past her barriers and insisted on being more involved. But I've learned that you can't save people who don't want to be saved. Vanessa made her choices, just like I made mine. The difference is that I chose love over greed, truth over manipulation, family over money. And they know that sometimes, the people who hurt us most are the ones who are hurting the deepest themselves. I never got the chance to say goodbye to Dad properly, but living in his house, tending his garden, and raising my children where he raised me, that's my goodbye. That's how I honor his memory. Vanessa took a lot from our family, but she couldn't take the love, she couldn't take the memories, and she couldn't take the legacy Dad left behind and the daughter he raised to be strong enough to fight for what's right. 5 years have passed since Dad's death. The house has settled into its rhythms as our family home. My daughters know every corner, every creaky floorboard, every hiding spot that Dad built into the walls. They've started asking questions about their aunt, the one who hurt their grandfather and went to prison. I've tried to answer honestly while protecting them from the worst details. "Why did she do it?" my daughter Emma asked last week. "Sometimes people make bad choices when they're hurting," I explained. "That doesn't excuse what they do, but it helps us understand why. Will she ever come home? Home. Even my children recognize that this house belongs to our family, that Vanessa forfeited her place here through her actions. I don't know," I answered honestly. "But if she does, it will only be if she's truly changed and makes amends for what she did." Last month brought an unexpected development. Carmen called to tell me that Vanessa had reached out through her prison counselor. She wanted to set up a meeting during her next furlough, a supervised visit where we could talk face to face. "You don't have to agree to this," Carmen warned. "She served her time, but that doesn't obligate you to forgiveness." I've been thinking about it ever since. Part of me wants to see her, to look in her eyes and try to understand how the sister I grew up with became someone capable of such cruelty. Another part of me fears that seeing her will just reopen wounds that have finally started to heal. My husband thinks I should focus on our future rather than the past. My daughters are curious about the aunt they've never met. Mrs. Patterson thinks forgiveness is good for the soul, but only when it's genuine. The decision is mine alone. Yesterday, I walked through Dad's garden, now in full summer bloom. The tomatoes are heavy on the vine, the sunflowers tower over the fence, and the roses he planted for Mom still perfume the air with their sweetness. Standing there, surrounded by the life Dad created with his own hands, I realized that this house has given me something Vanessa never understood: peace. Not the peace of getting everything I wanted, but the peace of knowing I did the right thing, of knowing I fought for truth and justice and love. Dad's legacy isn't in the property or the money or the inheritance. It's in the values he taught me, the strength he gave me, and the home he built that continues to shelter the people he would have loved most. Sometimes that's enough, sometimes that's everything, and maybe someday that will be enough to risk opening the door to forgiveness, but not today. Today, I'm content to tend Dad's garden, watch my daughters grow up in his house, and honor his memory by living the life he taught me to live, with integrity, compassion, and the courage to stand up for what's right. The letter from Vanessa requesting a meeting still sits on my kitchen table, unopened for 3 days now. I know whatever it says will change something, maybe everything. But for now, I'm choosing to preserve this moment of peace, this sense of completion that's taken 5 years to achieve. Maybe tomorrow I'll read it. Maybe next week. Maybe never. For the first time since Dad's death, that uncertainty doesn't scare me. I've learned that some stories don't need tidy endings to be complete. Some chapters close on their own terms when the people living them are ready to turn the page. And I'm not ready yet, but I'm getting there. One day at a time, one season at a time, one generation at a time, the way Dad would have wanted it.